Right, so I just want to thank everyone for being here for our EMR Research Insights Lunchtime Learning session. This series offers an opportunity for current and potential students and faculty and staff to gain insight into our ongoing research projects, research methodologies, and emerging trends. The EMR certificate and degree programs seek to develop scholars, evaluators, and leaders who have a comprehensive understanding and ability to integrate and utilize inquiry methods from multiple ontologies, epistemologies, and paradigms to address research and evaluative questions directed toward understanding and solving pressing problems and contributing to the knowledge base that informs our practice. The 3 dimensions of EMR are fully integrated into our MA and PhD programs, and we also offer 3 certificate options that allow you to focus on qualitative research, mixed methods, and evaluation for online or on-campus enrollment. You can visit our website or talk to any of our faculty members to learn more. So this month, Dr. Beixi Li is our featured speaker. Dr. Li is an assistant professor of evaluation, measurement, and research here at Western Michigan University. She received her PhD in learning, leadership, and organization development from the University of Georgia. Her research interests include adult learning, human resource development, and methodological innovation in qualitative inquiry. And now I will turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm very happy to be here to share one of my research projects. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so the project I'm sharing today is called Reimagining Scholarly Impact in Arts-Based Collaborative Autoethnography. So I want to thank Dr. Gautam Mitchell again for introducing me. So here's again a little background about me. So I started my career as an adult English as a second language teacher. So I was working in several nonprofit organizations in Philadelphia, working with newly arrived immigrant and refugee learners. And that experience really got me interested in adult learning. I want to know how adults learn, especially how adults learn in an informal, unstructured context. So I completed my PhD degree in adult learning, leadership, and organization development at the University of Georgia. And I was also exposed to qualitative research during my time at Georgia. So now I'm an assistant professor at Western, and I'm interested in adult learning, human resource development, and the qualitative research. So the topic of today is scholarly impact. And I think this is a topic that everyone in the room, everyone in WebEx right now might be familiar with or feel like this is a very relevant concept for me. So before I get into my project, first I want to hear from you. So my question for you is, what is scholarly impact? And please feel free to just input 3 words or phrases that you associate with scholarly impact in the chat. So when you hear the word, when you hear the phrase scholarly impact, when you hear this concept, what words or phrases come into your mind immediately? Please feel free to just put these words or phrases in the chat. Okay, so we have many very interesting answers in the chat. It could be, for example, the knowledge you generate, the theory you generate. It could be the impact the impact research has on the society. So I think what we can learn from this little activity is that scholarly impact is a quite complex concept. So scholarly impact is the influence of research within and beyond academia. However, this concept is not clearly defined in the academic community. So there could be many different views on what counts as scholarly impact. So Agnes and colleagues developed a pluralist conceptualization of scholarly impact. So in this multidimensional and multi-stakeholder model, scholarly impact is linked to 4 complementary dimensions: theory and research, society, education, and organization. So for theory and for the theory and the research dimension, the key stakeholders are the researchers, and the impact is usually measured using citations. And for the education dimension, the aspiration is for a scholar to have a long-lasting influence on student development. For the organizational dimension, the aspiration is to have an influence on practitioners and their practices. And for the society dimension, the goal is to have an influence on policymakers. So scholarly impact on one of the dimensions is not necessarily associated with the impact on the others. And the impact dimensions can be complementary and should not be viewed as being mutually exclusive. So even though this model includes a diverse range of activities and potential measurement, scholarly impact is often and sometimes exclusively measured by citations. So in the chat earlier, I've seen that people putting, citation numbers, publication numbers. So scholarly impact is sometimes exclusively measured by citation numbers. So academics need to develop a sense of these competing and sometimes conflicting and contradictory signals to achieve scholarly excellence and develop a coherent academic identity. So I think one of the tasks for an academic is to develop a conceptualization, their own conceptualization of scholarly impact. So here is the context of the study. So my collaborator and I, we are 2 early career tenure track faculty members working in our 2 universities. So universities characterized as high research activity institutions. So, and our inquiry was inspired by a common practice in higher education: review, tenure, and promotion. So during our collaboration, both of us were in the process of preparing our review portfolio. And we were both perplexed by the concept of scholarly impact and how we can demonstrate it. So what is the review, tenure, and the promotion process? So the review, tenure, and the promotion process is a formal procedure that academic institutions use to assess the performance and qualification of faculty members. Faculty members are usually reviewed annually or biannually to assess their teaching, research, and service contributions. So research on the RTP process has found that universities focus on research output and citation metrics, and early career researchers usually prioritize publication quantity and outlet prestige. So here we can see that scholarly impact is closely related with higher education's tenure and promotion system. The process of creating narrative is an opportunity for me, early career academic, to showcase the scholarly impact I am creating. So in 2023, my collaborator and I, we independently prepared our portfolio for our 2nd and 3rd year review as tenure track faculty members. So in our portfolios, we created well-crafted narratives supported by evidence of our scholarly impact, in addition to describing how we are becoming an academic scholar. So while we were working on these portfolios independently, we also engaged in this collaborative autoethnography to connect our personal insider experience as early career academics to more extensive conversation on scholarly impact. So the purpose of this collaborative autoethnography was to examine our growing understanding of achieving scholarly impact as early career academics using various concepts from transformative learning. So transformative learning is defined as the process by which people examine problematic frames of reference to make them more inclusive, discriminating, open, reflective, and emotionally able to change. And this was an arts-based collaborative autoethnography using poetic inquiry and narrative métissage. So before I go more in depth into poetic inquiry and narrative métissage, I just want to give you a little overview of autoethnography. So autoethnography is a qualitative research method that combines autobiography and ethnography. It involves researchers using their personal experiences as a primary source of data to explore cultural, social, or institutional phenomena. So there's three parts in autoethnography. The auto part refers to the personal or autobiographical aspect of the research, and it emphasizes the researcher's subjective experiences, reflection as the primary source of data. So in this studies, we are both researchers and the participants. The ethno part refers to the ethnographic or cultural perspective of the research. It involves the examination and interpretation of culture and social relations, practices, and context. And the graph part refers to the act of documenting, analyzing, and interpreting the collected data. Autoethnographers usually use different storytelling techniques, such as narrative analysis or any other literary devices to convey their findings in a compelling and evocative manner. So again, before I go deep into poetic inquiry and narrative métissage, I actually want to show you the first sort of like first round of collaboration that we engaged in that actually didn't happen. So collaborative autoethnography is a qualitative research method in which a team of researchers collect, analyze, and interpret their autobiographical data to make sense of collaborative experienced social cultural phenomena. So this is how we started this project. So we started our data collection by contributing self-reflective data currently into a shared document. So on the left, you can see some of the sort of like data collection instrument we created and some data we put into the instrument. So here you can see that we were following a pretty structured process in our data collection. So we became sort of dissatisfied with the data we collected and the preliminary analysis we created. And there are several reasons for this frustration. So first, we found ourselves attempting to find a coherent narrative in our data, but we were just not able to do that. We were not able to find a lot of coherence in our data. And second, we feared that we might have fallen into this trap of conventional qualitative research, which is that we become very obsessive with individualization and categorization. So at the same time, we're also sort of like reminded by some of the new contemporary writing, transformative learning, which links transformative learning with emotions, imagination, and artistic way of knowing. So we believe that we may have found a poetic occasion. So I think this is a really nice quote that illustrates what a poetic occasion is. Many ways in, many ways out, no meaning trapped, enclosed, contained, possibility wide open. If we want to nail down one specific meaning or interpretation, poetry is not the tool to use. That can be done quite satisfactorily in voice. But if the data are rich with ambiguity, open-endedness, paradox, mysteries, unresolved complexity, then we may have found an occasion for poetry. I think this quote really illustrated like the situation we were in, because we felt like the concept of scholarly impact itself contains many paradox and complexity and ambiguity. It's very difficult for us to just nail down one specific meaning or interpretation of it. So here is a very short overview of what arts-based research is. So arts-based research relies on the epistemological foundation for human inquiry that utilize art for way of understanding and representing the world. So methodologically speaking, arts-based research represents a set of tools that researchers across disciplines can use during different stages of research. So it can include data generation, data analysis, data interpretation, and data representation. And poetic inquiry is a form of Poetic inquiry is a form of transdisciplinary qualitative research in which researchers use poetry as in for inquiry. So again, poetry can be used in different stages of the study. And narrative métissage is an indigenous inspired research approach that invites the authoring of individual narratives and then interweaves the individual's narrative to illuminate the breeded and the relational character of our lives and experiences. So now I want to show you the sort of like the final product, like what the outcome of narrative métissage look like. I'm going to read this for you. I impact. The act starts with forcefully interrupting a room full of empty seats. Publish to provide evidence. Attending conference to increase visibility. Teaching, she leaves the room and enters the crowd. So I want you to just, after seeing this, after hearing it, just share maybe one thing that struck you or that you noticed. Please feel free just to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for sharing this in the chat. So now I want to share with you sort of like the process of doing poetic inquiry and narrative métissage. So this is how we applied poetic inquiry. So we started from just reading poems regularly. I think at least for me, poems is like not a super big part of my life. Like I would not intentionally read poems, but this collaboration gave me opportunity to be more present when there is a poem around me. So first we start reading poems regularly. So we read poetic inquiry projects on academic experience. We read other researchers' experience of using poems as a form of inquiry. And we use this writing prompt, which is what does scholarly impact mean to you? And we engaged in poetic thinking. So we heightened our awareness of the complexity of richness of our academic life, and we engaged in a lot of free writing. So basically, we wrote down things when we feel like, oh, that's kind of interesting, I want to put it down. And we also used found poetry. So found poetry is the process of appropriating and rearranging available materials to create something new. So like I mentioned earlier, both of us, we were in the process of creating our review portfolio. So both of us spent a lot of time examining the review 10-year promotion guidelines that each institution used. So we also did found poetry in which we appropriated and rearranged sentences from the guidelines to create new insights. And finally, after we created these poems, we used the narrative mintage as a collaborative tool. So I want to share with you, this was sort of like the first one I created. So first of all, I want to give you some kind of background of this poem. So I attended a 10-year and the promotion workshop. So I was there to learn, the best strategy to create this portfolio for myself, to craft this narrative, to prove my scholarly impact to other people. So during this session, some attendees got into a very heated discussion. So what they were talking about was that the participant was asking a question on how to create a positive narrative for an article published in a journal with low impact factor. So how to create a narrative to make this look good, even though this may be considered as bad. So it's very interesting because I was, writing down like what I should be doing to create this narrative. But at the same time, I can also feel, I can just physically feel my face just begin to flush, like my face became really red. It's almost like it was as if I was just physically in a race because like I feel like I need to put everything down, like I need to capture the urgency because if I don't learn how to do this, I will fall behind. So this is what I wrote, sort of like to process the emotions I experienced in the workshop. A room full of strategies, voices raising like numbers, urgency like a clock ticking. Each second a reminder that we are always in the act of proving ourselves, that we can never breathe, never rest, because it must always be more. But here in this space of urgency, I write not to sell, but to fill the quiet that we have forgotten amid the noise of impact. So again, like I want to just give you like a few seconds, just share one thing that struck you or that you have noticed from this one. Feel free to unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your perspective in the chat. So here is an exercise for you. This is from Leon and colleague. I think it's a very interesting exercise if you are thinking about, getting started, like how can I get started with poems? So first, you can come up with a challenge, such as, choosing just an abstract idea, such as happiness, joy, or, scholarly impact. And you brainstorm a list of all the concrete words you can think of that illustrate the abstraction you have chosen. Reread your list of concrete words. Are all the sense represented? Add more words as needed. And finally, form the beginning of a poem from the list. I think this is a very interesting exercise to help you sort of like get started. Like, how can I get started? with writing poems. So now both of us has finished just writing poems. So we were thinking about, okay, now we have finished writing poems. How can we collaborate? So when we were thinking about collaborating, we wanted to collaborate in a way that can enable the flourishing of plurality and ambiguity in our sense making. So I was reminded of narrative Métis of a narrative Métis session I participated in at the International Transformative Learning Conference. So a narrative Métis is an indigenous-inspired research approach that invites multiple authors' personal stories into intertwined narratives. It enables writers to imagine plural selves and communicate that embrace ambiguity and multiplicity. So after we finished writing our poems independently, we met online to discuss and collaborate. So first, we just read our poems out loud without interruption. And here on the right side, you can see this is kind of like a side by side of our poems. And you can just see how different our poems are. Like they are very different. So we read our so we place our poems side by side and read them out loud again. So this time we read while rearranging the multiple individual poems until they had been rearranged into four woven vintage, which is the first one I shared with you. So we just keep reading. Like for example, when I was reading, I might stop at one point. I feel like this is the time, maybe you can come in, maybe you can add some of your perspective here. So after creating the Métis, we returned it to our writing prompt, which is what does scholarly impact mean to you? And we engaged in a dialogue on what new insight we have gained from the Métis experience. So here I want to share, some of the lessons learned about scholarly impact from this experience. So first, we really value this, interconnectedness of scholarly dimensions. Research, teaching, and service, they are not separate dimensions. They are intertwined and they influence each other. So I think it means that when I am a researcher, it does not mean that I stop being a teacher. When I am a teacher in the classroom, it does not mean I stop being a researcher. So our research self really shapes our teaching self, and both contribute to our service self. So the boundaries between them are very fluid, and we never stop one and start another. For example, both of us, we find a lot of inspiration for research just from our teaching, and we also implement our own scholarship in the classroom. So the frustration we experienced as we develop our scholarly impact came from how often teaching and research are viewed as binary in the academy. So second, we felt the need to embody our scholarly principles in practice. So again, research and teaching should not be viewed as mutually exclusive, and combining teaching and research can strengthen both. As academics in education, we feel like we have this unique advantage in aligning our research agenda with our teaching philosophy. However, we have also observed discrepancies in how academics research and teach. So we must ensure that the principles guiding our research are consistently reflected in our teaching practices. And finally, we believe it is important to constantly reflect on our scholarly self in academia. So transformative learning leads to self-reformation, where different aspects of ourselves are integrated and connected. So recognizing and embracing our contradictions and the multiplicities helps us grow both as academics and humans. And this process also leads us to a more deeper understanding of our role as academic in the world. So again, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like we have a very unique advantage as academic in education, in which it is easy. It is not as challenging for us to align our research with our teaching. So we also came up with some of the practical implications for academics who are interested in integrating arts-based learning, arts-based research into their scholarship. So first, we can embrace multiple ways of knowing. Learning environments should integrate cognitive, affective, and rational and irrational ways of knowing. Artistic expression surfaces unconscious knowledge and allows learners to reimagine themselves and their inquiries. But we found it to be very important to be mindful of the vulnerability in artistic inquiry. So in 2023, we presented this project at a conference, and the participants, the attendees, they got quite emotional while reading our poems and Métis. So there is this, emotional components in the arts-based learning. So engaging with art requires embracing uncertainty and emotional depth, both for instructor and learners. And artistic expression can challenge conventional academic norms, but also open pathways for transformative learning. So because this is an autoethnography, so we faced some quite unique ethical challenges in this process. So autoethnography itself presents several practical and ethical issues. So first one, unlike a traditional qualitative research methods in which the participants' identities are protected, we as autoethnographers, we make our identity known to the public. And since autoethnography often involves the portrayal of others in the story, it makes concealing the identities of others difficult. And second, autoethnographers need to consider ways to protect themselves, because once the story becomes public, our life will be under consumption of others. And a specific challenge we faced was that in this collaborative autoethnography, two non-Indigenous researchers adopted the approach of narrative métissage. So this is an Indigenous-inspired methodology. So Bishop reminded non-Indigenous researchers that even though métissage is not solely an Indigenous methodology, they should be mindful of the history of métissage and Métis and acknowledge the legacy and impact of colonialism on the Indigenous community. So I think this might be a good time for us just to take a few minutes just to reflect on this. How do you describe your relationship with Indigenous people and the community? I think this was sort of like the first question for us as two non-Indigenous researchers that have to confront. So first, we were confronted with the issue was how we describe our relationship with and understanding of Indigenous people and the community. So each Indigenous community's experience is clearly contextually unique. And our status as US-based international researchers from Asia further complicated our relationship with Indigenous communities in the different cultural and national contexts that we are situated in. For example, I do not identify as an Indigenous researcher. I identify as a non-Indigenous researcher. And even though I'm from China, and even though China supports the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the Chinese government doesn't adopt the conceptualization of Indigenous people or group. So this is not something that I'm familiar with growing up because the government does not adopt this conceptualization. And there was also, so after coming to the United States, after studying my PhD program, there was also very limited coverage of indigenous epistemology and methodologies in the curriculum. So we became members of an academic community that reproduced the evaluation of indigenous people and the knowledge. So second, we were mindful of how much ownership we can claim of narrative métissage and the knowledge produced by practicing it. So narrative, so métissage can be viewed as an umbrella term that encompasses a variety of interrelated theoretical and methodological approaches that draw from the practices of mixing and weaving. So métissage is popularized by post-colonial indigenous and Métis scholars in Canada to challenge positivism and celebrate diverse ways of knowing. So as non-indigenous researchers interested in indigenous epistemology and methodology, we sort of encountered this paradox of appropriation, which is that how can we engage with narrative métissage meaningfully without appropriating indigenous knowledge? So in our inquiry, we primarily drew from literature on métissage as a creative and literary research method. So we did not intend to position ourselves as Métis and acknowledge that our knowledge of métissage remained necessarily partial and incomplete. And finally, in the research process, we positioned ourselves as settler of color in the making. So settler of color in the making is a conceptualization by Chen. So Chen conceptualized non-white international students as settlers of color in the making because they by default passively engage in a process that perpetuates settler colonialism. So as international scholars, we benefit from the policy and discourse based on settler colonialism that perpetuates immigrants as more desirable over the indigenous people. So we recognize that we are in this sort of like a complex position. So on one hand, we might face marginalization and exclusion, but on the other hand, we might reinforce the structure that perpetuate harm toward indigenous and the marginalized community. So in the peer review process, a reviewer suggested that we should remove this conceptualization from our manuscript. So basically, it is okay for us to say that we are international scholars, we are from Asia, but we should remove the conceptualization of settlers of color in the making from the manuscript. And the suggestion from the reviewer is that it would require a lot more writing to set up this argument. And we do agree with that. It would require more writing on the historical context to set up this argument. And that's kind of beyond the scope of the work. However, this experience left us in this sort of paradoxical situation where the very structure that we aim to critique constrain our ability to do so. So this is basically the end of my presentation. So here are some of the further reading if you are interested in collaborative autoethnography, using narrative métissage, and poetic inquiry in your research. Thank you.